Hilchos Erchin Vacharamin Perek Shlishi, the laws of vows concerning donations of value and the laws of vows concerning dedications, chapter 3. Today, we're going to be focused exclusively on a very interesting law about Erchin. Erchin, of course, are the types of vow that require a person to pay the value of another human being as it's fixed by the Torah. We saw the table the other day, but it's here on the screen again to remind us that this is not about deciding the human's integral value. This is about the Torah putting a value on a person so that if another person says, I'm going to pay your value to the Beis HaMikdash, to the Holy Temple, this is how much you have to pay. Under 30 days, it's nothing. From 30 days to 5 years old, there's one value. From 5 to 20, a second. From 20 to 60, a third. And from 60 to one's death, there's a fourth value. What we're going to see, essentially, and this is the topic of the entire chapter, is that these values, this table, was only given for a person who can afford to pay this amount at the time that he made his vow. However, if a person is poor, he has a whole separate set of laws that apply to him and how he goes about paying up his pledge. And that's what we're going to focus on today. But as an introduction, the Rambam tells us a law that will affect or will directly bring out this point of the difference between rich and poor. And that is, Hamarich es hapoches meben esrem, halacha aleph. If somebody pledges to donate the value of somebody who's less than 20 years old, in which case the male would have to go for 20 shekels and the female for 10. V'le amad badin ad shehaya yeser al esrem. But they only came to court to be appraised, as we mentioned in passing the other day, that in order for the person to become actually obligated to bring his vow, you would have to go to a Kohen. The Kohen would appraise you, basically ask for your age, confirm the age, and then tell you how much you have to pay. So this guy only got around to going to the court or to the Kohen, and by that time he was more than 20 years old, and now his value increases, and the Rambam picks this case because the value increases by the most. Crossing over the threshold of 20 years old brings the male's value up to 50 and the female up to 30. So now the question is, which value do you give? Do you give the value at the time of the vow or the value at the time of the appraisal? It says the Rambam, the donor is only obligated to pay the value of a person less than 20 years old. This is the rule that we're introducing, which is going to bring us the springboard to the rich and poor concept. The whole idea of a fixed value follows the time that the vow was made. Not the time at which the person was brought to court for appraisal. Halacha beis, kala erchin haktsuvin b'Torah, the entire table of fixed value that's set in the Torah, hein shenoisen hamayirich im haya asher. They are the number of coins required to be given if the donor was rich and could afford to pay up his vow. Avalim haya ani ve'en yadei maseges, but if he was poor and he couldn't afford it, noisen kol hanimtza biyadei. Then you give whatever you have in your hands. Pay whatever you can. Afilu sela echad, even if it means you're only going to pay one silver coin. We're going to see in a moment, less than a silver coin is not valid. You got to have at least one silver coin, but you can get away with even that if that's all you have. V'niftar, and you're exempt from the vow. There's no such thing as like it's going to come back to bite you in the future. You pay up half now, and then later when you get more money. If at the time, since the whole erech vow only goes after the time that you were in, when you made the vow, so if you were poor at the time of the vow, you give whatever you have right now, and that exempts you. Shenemar, as it says in the Torah, and here's the verse we can see it, if the person is too poor, then the value that he pledged to give, the Torah continues, al pi asher tasi, yad hanoider, based on the capacity. How much the person who made the vow can afford, that's how much, as the pasuk continues, yarichenu hakoyin, that's how much the Kohen should value his vow to be paid. But you don't have to pay the full thing. Uminayin, how do we know? Shehu neisen afilu sela echad im ein le'ela sela echad. How do we know that the appraisal that goes according to financial capacity comes to the conclusion that you have to pay even a silver coin if that's what you have? Shenemar, because it says in a later verse, B'chol erkecha yiyeh b'shekel hakodesh. All of the values that are being paid up in this section of the Torah follows the holy shekel. So literally in context, what are we saying? That what kind of coins should you be giving to pay up the vow? The Torah says 30 shekels, 50 shekels. What kind of shekels are we talking about? The holy shekel. But from the fact that the Torah couches this verse by using the singular form of shekel, which is equivalent to the selah, the modern day selah, from this we can also learn another law, she'ein ba'erchin paches misala. Right? There's never a payment less than a silver coin. There's no more than 50 because it's the highest age. A male between 20 and 60 gets the value of 50 shekel. But there'll be no less than shekel HaKodesh. That's the minimum you're going to pay. So what do you do if you don't even have a seller? The person, for whatever reason, was feeling like making a vow to pledge someone's value, but he didn't actually have any money in the bank. Not even the value of a silver coin. Says the Rambam, we do not take any less than a silver coin. And here, we actually end up with a different law. Because you don't have a silver coin to pay, the entire vow is turned into a debt. And later on, if a person can afford and he becomes rich, let him give the entire vow that's fixed in the Torah as matching the time that he made his vow, whatever age the person was. So in other words, here you see the difference where actually being poorer could make you worse off. As long as you have anything above a coin, above a silver coin, you give that and that takes care of the vow. But if you have less than the selah, now we convert that obligation into a debt and you pay it up later according to your full financial capacity when you come back into good financial means. Halacha hey, ashir sheherich veheni. If a person made a vow to give a value donation when he was rich, and later he became poor, or the opposite, when he declared the vow he was poor, now he became rich. So here, we don't care about the time. Here we say, as long as at one point you were rich, you have to give as a rich man would give. But if at the time you made the vow you were poor, then you became rich, then you became poor again, if at the time of the vow and at the time of payment you're still poor, then you're only obligated to give the value as a poor person would have to give, even though you became rich in between. Halacha vav, ashir sha'amar erki alai. Here's our rich guy, you can see him next to the diamond, and here's our poor guy, okay, he's the janitor, he's cleaning out the park. And here's the third guy. This is the guy sitting on the park bench. So the rich guy says, Erki alai, I want to give my value to the temple. Oy erech ploini, or I want to give that guy, Mr. Park Bench, that guy's value to the temple. As a rich man, he has to pay the full amount. That's what he could afford. Listen to the case. V'shama ha'ani v'amar masha amar ze alai. The poor person sees this rich guy making a donation. He doesn't want to be left out of the party. So he says, you know what? Whatever he said, I'm taking upon myself. Now the question is, by whose standards do you have to pay? Had the poor person actually said the same words, Erech ploini alai, I want to give the value of this guy to the temple, of course, he'd have to pay only by his own poor standard. But since he said what he said, in other words, he attached himself to the rich guy, the Rambam rules, here, the poor person is liable to pay the full vow as a rich person would pay it up. A complete value. You got to pay the full amount. But if a poor person would have declared about another guy, even if that guy was rich, and he would say, Erech ze olai, I'm going to give the value of this guy to the temple, since he's the poor person uttering the vow, he's only obligated to give whatever amount the poor person would have to give, which is as he could financially afford. Halacha Zayin, the Rambam asks a wonderful question. We just described two cases of a poor person. One where he attaches himself to a rich man, and he has to pay the way a rich man pays. And one where he declares himself the utterance of the vow, he only has to pay the way a poor man pays. Bottom line, he's a poor guy. He doesn't have money in the bank. So what's the practical difference? Who cares if he has to give like a rich guy or has to give like a poor guy? He's a poor guy. What's the difference between a poor person who's obligated to pay as a poor person pays, or a poor person who's obligated to pay as a rich person pays, which is the full amount? Either way, he won't afford the full amount. Says the Rambam, what I alluded to earlier. When a person is only obligated to pay as a poor man pays, once the court takes from him whatever he could afford, even if in that moment it's only one silver coin, and then he becomes rich, he's no longer obligated to pay any more towards the vow. It goes by the financial capacity that you had when you paid up. You paid up whatever you had, that's it. You get more later, it doesn't matter. But in the scenario where the poor person is obligated to pay, like a rich person pays, the rest of the pledge is converted into a debt till he gets rich and he has to completely pay it. That's the difference between becoming obligated and a rich man's payment. Rich man's payment means you have to pay like a rich man. You don't get off the hook with just giving what you have. Halacha ches. Hamefardesh asa erech. Somebody explicitly states the amount that he's going to have to give as the value donation. In other words, usually how does it work? You go over to another guy, you say, I want to give your value to the temple, or my value to the temple. Go figure out your age, and based on the table, you figure out how much you have to give. But let's say you're 25 years old. You know that your value is 50 silver coins. Or there's a woman, she's 25 years old, her value is 30 coins. So instead of saying, let me give your value or my value, and then you go figure it out, you say to begin with, the Amar, a person says, Erki alai chamishim slaim. I take upon myself to give my value to the temple, 50 silver coins. You clearly state the number. Or erech pleini alai shloishim slaim. Or that woman, I want to give her value, 30 silver coins. Since you said the number, einay niden behesagyat. Even if you're poor, you don't get judged by the financial capacity that you have. The court will take whatever you have right now, and the rest remains a debt until you get rich and pay it up. Another case where the dispensation for the poor doesn't apply. If the person didn't use the word erech, erech is the Torah-based worth. I'm going to remind you of this slide that we had the other day. There's a difference between when you say erech, which is the Torah-based worth, or damim, which is the market-based worth. Erech is where you have the table and when you have the special law for the poor person. But if a person says, damai olai, I take upon myself to give my worth, my market-based worth to the temple, or demay play the olai, or the market-based worth of somebody else to the temple, now you don't get to be judged by the financial capacity rule. When somebody obligates himself in market-based worth, it's basically like explicitly stating your vow. It's as if you said, I'm taking upon myself to give 100 coins to the temple treasury, which of course you have to give the full 100 coins. If somebody says, I take upon myself to give a Torah fixed value, he didn't specify the number. So we already said the rule for this in chapter 1, that if you say, I'm going to give a Torah value, you only have to give the lowest on the table, which is 3 silver coins. The question is, though, is it like saying 3 silver coins? If it's like saying 3 silver coins, then you have to actually give 3 silver coins. But if it's not like saying 3 silver coins, then if you're poor and you only have 1, you can get away with 1. So the Rambam says, it's not like saying explicitly 3 coins. You, if you're poor, would be judged by the financial capacity rule like any other donor of a Torah fixed value. You have a guy who says twice, I take upon myself to give my value to the temple. I take upon myself to give my value to the temple. He's a poor guy. All he has is 10 silver coins. 10 silver coins is not enough to satisfy either of the vows, because assuming he's an older man, he's an adult man, his value is more than 10. The question is, how do you divide the 10? So ideally, in the initial instance, you would have to give all 10 to the first vow. You got to fulfill your vows in order. You give all 10 to the first vow. In that way, you fulfilled your first vow, because whenever you give all that you have, you can't come to you for more later when you make more money. And the second vow, you'll be treated like a poor man who has less than a silver coin, and therefore it gets converted into a debt which you have to pay up later. Now, what did this guy do? V'nasan teisha lashniya v'sala l'rishayna. He had the hekdesh, the temple treasury, appraise his second vow first, and then his first vow. And what he did was he paid 9 shekels to the second vow, 9 silver coins to the second vow, and 1 to the first vow, trying in this way to get out of both. Because he gave 9 to the second one, couldn't give everything because he still has the first vow to keep, right? And then he gives 1 to the first vow. So the Rambam Yotze Yedei, and that works, you fulfilled both. Now, why is that a novelty? That's a novelty because typically when it comes to debts, let's say it wasn't the temple treasury, let's say it was a regular guy. Okay, a person borrows $100 from one guy, he borrows $100 from a second guy 2 days later. You have to pay your debts back in order. So much so that if you pay back the second creditor first, the first creditor can actually go to the second creditor and expropriate whatever money you paid him. Because he has the document that has the earlier date, he gets paid first. So here too, one would expect, one would think maybe, that the temple treasury should say, no, you have to pay all 10 to the first vow. That's the one that came first. And the second one will take care of you later when you make more money. Says the Rambam, Erchin lav kechayvesein. These pledges of the Torah-based value is not treated like debts. Even though technically speaking, everything you have in your hand is on lien. To the first vow, hektish me'uchar shegava gava. Unlike regular creditors, if the temple treasury collects a later debt before an earlier debt, it's considered to have been collected. And the commentaries say why? Because at the end of the day, it's one creditor. Hektish is the owner of both of these debts. So who cares which debt they choose to attach their payment to? If they take the payment, it's taken. But let's say you do the opposite. Let's say the guy would say, you know what? I want to get rid of both, but I'm going to go in order. I'm going to give 9 coins to the first vow and keep 1 so I can get out of the way from the second vow. Interestingly, you're going to fulfill your second vow, because when you gave that 1 coin, you really didn't have anything else. You had paid the other 9 to the first vow, and you're giving 1 over here, so it's taken care of. And now you can't afford anything more. However, you didn't fulfill your first vow. Why didn't you fulfill your first vow? Because you didn't give everything you had. Everything you had in your hands was on lien to the first vow. And even when you gave the 9 coins, you had 1 coin left. Meaning you didn't give everything you can afford. Therefore, we convert the rest of what remains in the first vow into a debt, and you have to get rich and pay it up later when you can afford it. A person says, I'm going to give twice my value, 2 of my values to the temple. And all he had was an amount of money less than covering both. So here, it's not like you said in the last case, 2 separate vows, my value, my value. You said 2 of my value in 1 lump sum. So if you don't have enough to cover that 1 lump sum, now we're in doubt. Does your money get attached to both of those vows? Give half of what you have to fill the first vow, half of what you have to fill the second vow, and that's it. You've given all you have. You're exempt from the rest. Or maybe go in order. Give 1 complete vow, fulfill 1 with whatever you have. Either the fully or whatever you have. And then the rest, like a poor person who has less than a silver coin, should be treated like a debt. Till you actually pay it up as a poor person, as a rich person, whatever you can afford. The point is, does it go equally to both or first to one and then to the other? That's the doubt. We're not sure. Halacha Yud Gimel. By the way, according to the Radvaz, who's a commentary in the Rambam, says because of the doubt, we go leniently. You have to pay only half to here and half to here. However, like many cases of monetary doubt, if the temple treasury comes over and grabs your money first, and they take it all to the first one and say, hey, we want the second one to be a debt, they're in the right. That's many times how we rule in cases of doubt. Initially, you have to pay more leniently, but if the other guy grabs more, according to the more stringent view, then since he grabbed it, it's already in his possession, we don't take it out. Halacha Yud Gimel Hamafrish Erko Yadamav. A person puts aside the money to pay up his pledge of Torah-based worth or market-based worth, v'nignevu ayavdu, and the money got stolen or lost. Afal pishalei amar alai. Even though you didn't say the word alai in your vow, which typically means on me, I'm taking responsibility to replace them. Even if you didn't say that word, when it comes to these vows, there's a special rule that you're obligated to take care of the money till they reach the temple treasury's hands. Because it says, it's a clear verse, you have to give the value on that day, and on that day it becomes holy to God, which means the money remains mundane, even though you put them aside, until they get to the temple treasury's hands. The Rambam is alluding to a bigger concept that maybe we can just spend a minute to expand on it. When it comes to vows concerning sacrifices, there are 2 ways to enunciate the vow, formulate the vow. One would be to say, Hare olai, I take it upon myself to bring a sacrifice. Other one would be to point to an animal and say, Hare zu, this is going to be a sacrifice. Typically, in those cases, if you said, I take the responsibility, then even if the one you chose gets lost, you got to replace it, because you took responsibility. So even if this one gets lost, you got to bring another one. But if you said, this is going to be a sacrifice, so you've only placed the holiness on this one, and if it gets lost, you're exempt. But that's only because when you declare a sacrifice holy, it actually becomes holy. But in this case, the money does not become holy right away. It only becomes holy upon transfer to the temple treasury. So no matter what language you use to formulate the vow, it doesn't change the responsibility that you carry towards that money. You must get the money to the temple treasury. If you didn't get it there, then you didn't fulfill your vow. So you got to always bring it, even if it gets stolen or lost. Halacha Yudalad Chayave Erchin V'Damim. People that are obligated to pay up market worth or Torah-based worth, memashkin inaysan. The court has the right to come to their house and take a collateral by force. Forcibly take back what they promise. Usually when a Jew owes another Jew money, you cannot take collateral forcibly. You can go to his house, knock on the door, and if he brings something out, then good. But you can't go in there and take it on your own. Here, temple treasury is allowed to. So much so that the temple treasury doesn't have to return the collateral by day or by night. This is a law, special law when it comes to collateral. We're going to learn about it later on in the Rambam's 13th book, that if you do take collateral from a person who owes you money, and it's an object that they use by day or by night, you must return it to them when they need to use it. You can take it during the other times when they're not using it, but you must give it back to them when they need to use it. Here, the Rambam says we can take collateral and not give back the collateral at all. The court will step in and they'll sell whatever you have. Real estate, movable property, clothing, articles of the household, servants, animals, they can get their debt paid back from anything you have on your property. Except for they cannot sell clothing of your wife, clothing of your kids, neither clothing which you already had dyed with them in mind, even though they didn't get to use it yet, nor new sandals that you bought for them. Similarly, if a person would declare all of his property hekdesh, consecrated, these things, wife's clothing, children's clothing, shoes bought with their intent, don't become holy because they're not yours. They belong already to your wife and your kids. Halacha tezvav. Additionally, when the court comes to take care of their debt and they take everything from the person, they will leave him from his properties. This guy who promised a pledge of Torah-based worth, market-based worth, or promised 100 silver coins to the temple and doesn't have it, when they come and take away all his possessions, they're going to leave him basic physical and spiritual needs. They leave him a pair of tefillin, head and arm tefillin, v'sandalav, a pair of sandals, the kisei leishivalav, a chair to sit on, umita umatzah ha'u'uyin lelishan aleihem, a bed with its sheets, proper, able to sleep on. If he was a poor person, they don't give him full sheets, a bed and a little mat to sleep on, because he can make do with less. We give him a bunch of food, enough to last a month, and a bunch of clothing to last for a year, for 12 months. That's only for him, not for his wife and kids. Even though we know the husband has to provide for his wife's and kids' clothing and food. But the court can say, we're only dealing with you. We're only leaving you what you need, not what your wife and kids need. They only give him the clothing which is fitting for him. Halacha tazayin. Clothing doesn't just mean you get to wear whatever you want, a fancy Armani suit. No. If he was wearing at the time silk garments or golden garments, we take them off of him. We give him whatever clothing is befitting for his regular class, for his regular standard. We give him weekday standard clothes, not Shabbat or holiday standard clothes. Regular pair of clothes. If he was a craftsman, an artisan, we give him 2 of every type of tool that he needs to use. Ketzad, what would that look like? If he was a carpenter, we give him 2 saws, 2 planes. If he had multiple tools of one type and only very few tools of the other, we don't sell the larger quantity and fill in the smaller quantity. You give him 2 tools of the larger quantity, and if he only has one of the lesser one, that's it, just give him 1. If he was a farmer or a donkey driver, we don't give him his animal that he uses to donkey drive or to farm, to plow his field. Even though it's the only source of income. Doesn't matter, you promised to give money to the temple treasury, you don't have it, they're going to take it away from you. Hayasapan, if he was a sailor, ein noisnin leisvinasa, you don't give him his boat. You give everything has to be sold till you pay up the vow. Halacha yutes. What if, when they came down to this guy's property, they noticed that there's some products that if you wait some time, they'll be worth more. There were some animals, some slaves, some diamonds. And the businessmen who were going to make the purchases here, they said, listen, spend a little money, go to the store, buy this slave a nice suit, his value is going to go up in 100 coins. Or this cow, you wait for the meat market day and you sell it, it's going to be worth 10 more coins. Or this diamond, bring it to this city where there's diamond dealers, it's worth a lot of money. Here it's only worth very little money. We don't listen to them. What do we do? We sell everything in its place, in its time as it is. Because it says, the same verse as before. You give the Torah-based value on that day holy to God, which means anything holy, any type of payment made to the temple treasury, we don't brush it up, we don't wait for a market day, we don't bring it from place to place. No transporting, no polishing, no waiting. Temple treasury gets to collect in its place, in its time, and that's it. That's only though for movable property and slaves. Then we don't wait and polish. But real estate, it's not going anywhere anyways. We make an announcement for 60 days, consecutively, morning and evening, and then we sell it. Because that announcement will attract more buyers, and then you'll get it for a higher price, and no one can steal real estate. But if you're going to wait and move and transport other movable objects, there's a lot of worry, a lot of risk, too much risk. So it doesn't justify the risk. But when it comes to real estate, we definitely do make pre-announcements to allow it to fetch a higher market price.